So, as I was saying, it is a very important chapter. Remember that in chapter 7, we saw how Yahweh prophesied about the coming of Yahushua the Messiah, about Yahweh manifesting on earth as the first through a virgin. Then we have chapter 9, in which Yahweh reveals his coming as the last through a birth, a regular birth, not through a virgin like the first time in which he had to come to pay for our sins. Um, so now in chapter 11, we see that it refers to both first and last, and about in part their function or the reason why Yahweh would send or come twice. Um, so so chapter 7 reveals the coming of the first. Then we have 9, which is two later, right? The coming of the last, and then two chapters after, which would be in 11. Um, we have a connection with both at the same time, as we will see in a moment. So it says, chapter 11, verse 1, and a rod shall come forth from the stump of Yishai, and a sprout from his roots shall be fruitful. So here first we have Yishai, which is David's father, right? King David's father. So um, here the fact that Yahweh is using Yishai and not David connects with the fact that when he came to the earth, which he did through the tribe of Yehuda, through Yishai, David, etc. When he did that, he asked the Pharisees, whose son is the Messiah? And they said, David's son. And he said, how can he be David's son if David himself in Psalm 110 calls him sovereign, right? When he said, Yahweh said to my sovereign, sit at my right hand. So David himself was saying in the book of Psalms, in the Old Covenant, the Tanakh, that right next to the Almighty Creator, Yahweh, there is our sovereign, Yahushua, his son, the Messiah. Something which Jews till this day don't understand. And if we were to ask the same question to Christian pastors, they would answer the same as the Pharisees back in the day. So that is also part of the reason why the Pharisees, right after that question from Yahushua and that answer that he himself gave them, they weren't able to say anything else, and they didn't dare to ask him anything else from that day forward. So Yahushua was pretty much telling them that he is the root of David, not the son of David, even though genetically he had to manifest through the tribe of David. But like John said, John the Baptist said, he who comes after me was before me, right? So even though Yahushua came through the tribe of Yehuda, through David, Yahushua existed before Adam, because Yahushua was the image from which Yahweh made Adam, and that's why we were made in his image and likeness. And Yahushua is that image of Yahweh. So Yahushua was revealing to be the root of David, because they were expecting the last, they were expecting the king, but Yahushua came as the root, as the priest, according to the order of Melchizedek. So in this chapter, when we are about to um, um, read about the coming of the first and the last, Yahweh put Yishai in the middle instead of David. I'm sure there's several reasons why, but one of them, because Yahushua said to be the root of David. So if he would have used David, that idea would not fit that well here, by using David and then put the root of David after David. So he uses Yishai because then the root is the root of Yishai, and therefore as the root of David as well, who came after Yishai. Also, Yishai means he who possesses, he who owns, a wealthy person. So we know Yahushua means Yahweh saves, right? Because it's similar to YishaYahu, the name of the prophet, right? YishaYahu, whom Yahweh saved, and Yahushua, Yahweh saves, right? But Shua is also connected or also means riches. So Yahushua also means Yahweh enriches. And let me go to the concordance here in Isaiah 11 and the name Yishai. The name Yishai, you see, it says, I possess. It comes from Yesh, which is there is, or to have, being, existence, substance, there is. So Yishai, one yud, which would be I possess, I own. And as we know, Yahweh owns everything. He created everything and he owns everything. And he, like in the parable of the prodigal son, said to Yahushua, everything that is mine is yours. Like Yahushua said to the disciples, everything that is Yahweh gave me everything pretty much, he said, right? Everything that is the Father's is mine as well. And I gave you from what I received from the Father. So Yahweh is the one who possesses uh, creation. And also remember that this is connected to the title Shaddai, which means omnipotent. So Shaddai, they're going to say breast because it's one of the meanings, pronounced a bit different. Um, and if we were to put the yud here and separate this, we have there is enough, right? So yesh dai. So there is enough power in Yahweh to do all things. That's why Shaddai is normally interpreted as omnipotent. So also, once again, you guys saw the name Yishai. So you see that it is very interesting. It is a yud, a shin, and another yud. So there you go, Yishai. A hand at the beginning and another hand at the end, right? For the yud represents a yad, a hand. And the shin represents fire, the consuming fire. So it would be like the consuming fire manifesting through his two hands, which would be first and last. Um, and even remember that the shin is formed by three letters, a nun, a vav, and a zayin. And those three letters represent the three messengers sent by Yahweh, prophesied in Malachi 3:1, right? Which would be Eliyahu, who then came as John the Baptist, then the Messiah, Yahushua, and then the prophet like Moshe, the last. So the Shin represents those three messengers as well, and two manifestations each Yud. So going back, it says, and a rod shall come forth from the stump of Yishai. In Hebrew, it says, Beyatza Choter. So it will come out. Here it uses stump, right? And that connects with how there would be an apostasy after the Messiah came. Because after the Messiah came as the seed, the word of Yahweh, who had to die to then give much fruit, who had to die alone, like he said, coming as the seed, the word of Yahweh. So he became the root. But when the congregation started, it was cut by the axe of Rome, right, which represents is represented by iron in the book of Daniel. So the axe of Rome cut the congregation that was growing from the seed that was Mashiach, and that was the apostasy, right? That started with Rome making Christianity their religion and changing it. Well, the belief of the apostles and everything that they were preaching, changing it to what it became called uh, Christianity or Catholicism, whatever. So, and a rod, right, is talking about a branch. It mentions rod, which connects to authority, right, like the rod of a leader, a king. So it is mentioning the coming of the last as the leader, the king, like Moshe became the leader of the people, and then David, the king of Israel. So he's referring to the one who comes with the rod of iron to lead the nations, right? As it is prophesied in the book of Psalms and also in the book of Revelation, as Mashiach said that he would give to the last, he who overcomes, he would give him the rod to rule the nations. So the last is also called the branch, a branch that comes out of the stump that was growing but was cut by the apostasy. And it began growing when Mashiach came to die and became the root. So, and a rod, and how interesting that I have this shirt today. I didn't plan it. Yahushua is the root. That's crazy. So, and a rod shall come forth from the stump of Yishai, and a sprout from his roots shall be fruitful. As we know, the last would be a descendant of Joseph through Ephraim. Here, where it says fruitful, if we go to the Hebrew, you see it says Yifre, Yifre, which has the same root as Ephraim, Yifre. For Ephraim means fruitful. And okay, weird that they're not writing it in this one. This translation doesn't have it like that. That's weird. Look, this is the verse in Hebrew, and they cut the last. Well, they put it before last, but they didn't translate it that well because it says grow, while while it is referring to fruit, to bear fruit. You see, branch off. So this is um the word to be fruitful, and then that is the root of the name Ephraim. You see here, and the name of the second called he Ephraim, for Elohim had caused me to be fruitful. So he called him Ephraim because Yahweh made him. Let me see this verse. Because Elohim Hifrani made me fruitful. So that's why he called him Ephraim, right? So the last is a descendant of Ephraim. One of the reasons, because he is the branch that will give the fruit that will be given to Yahweh at the end of times, which are the chosen few, 144,000. So we see that verse saying or referencing that verb that refers to Ephraim in the coming of the last. And Yishai obviously would refer to Yahudah, the coming of the first, genetically speaking. All right, so, and a rod shall come forth from the stump of Yishai, and a sprout from his roots shall be fruitful. Venetzer, a sprout. Netzer is a word that is also used several times in the prophecies to refer to the coming of the last, the prophet like Moshe. Netzer. Now, remember that what the first fulfills spiritually, the last fulfills physically or in the literal sense, and vice versa. So just like Yahushua was born of a virgin, the last will be spiritually born of a virgin by coming out of the congregation that is called a virgin because it's the only one that has the true doctrine. So in this case, the 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 apostles, the disciples, the Talmidim, refer to this word, connecting it to Yahushua, um, in a, well, the last is the Netzer. We could say well, obviously it's not the literal sense because it's not part of a tree, but in the most literal sense, in the sense that it's a descendant that will give fruit that Yahweh is choosing, right? The chosen few. However, Yahushua uh, was from Nazareth, right? And the root of Nazareth is Netzer. So that's why the disciples would say regarding Mashiach that he fulfilled the prophecy regarding him being a Natsar or Netzer because he was from uh, Nazareth, right? Which is also the same letters, a bit of a different pronunciation, refers to the guarded one, and that is how most commonly that is interpreted when it comes to Mashiach living in Nazareth as the one who was guarded. He was there to be guarded, and he came to give a guard or protection to the people of Israel. So this Natsar is connected to both first and last for two different reasons. Yahushua, because he was uh, literally living in a place called Nazareth. And the last, we could say spiritually or metaphorically, because he comes as a branch to give fruit, the 144,000. So this term refers to both prophetically, first and last. This other one, let me check something because I actually don't remember well. When referring to Joseph in the 22 in Hebrew, Yahweh uses several terms, but other terms to refer to a branch, Joseph being the branch. As I just mentioned, the Netzar connected to Ephraim. Ephraim is a descendant of Joseph. So, interestingly enough, which is also an important thing to understand regarding the coming of the first and the last, is that here it is mentioning Yishai, right, as the one in the middle of the root and the branch. However, that refers to Yahweh, the spirit of Yahweh who owns everything, right? I already mentioned that according to the meaning of the name. And I say that because remember, I just mentioned Genesis 49 because in Genesis 49 is one of many chapters in scriptures where we see that the first manifestation of Yahweh would be through the tribe of Yehudah, and the second manifestation of Yahweh would be through the tribe of Joseph. This is something that Jews do understand, and they do have it in several books, although they didn't accept the first. They didn't accept Yahushua because their doctrine regarding that is a bit different than what the scripture actually says. They do believe in two persons that would come through these two tribes, but they believe they would come around the same time span. However, Yahweh reveals that one would come in the year 4000, well, die in the year 4000, and then 2000 years later, the last would come because Yahweh made the light of the world on the fourth day of the week, and the man, he made him on the sixth day. So Yahushua came and he said, I am the light of the world, because he came to open or close the fourth millennium and open the fifth millennium. And then the last comes as the Son of Man. And so therefore he comes to close the 6,000 years of creation, like the 6 days for Yahweh, like to Yahweh 1 day is like 1,000 years. So remember that Yahushua HaMashiach made us Yahudim through him, because he is the true vine, and we need to be united with him in order to be part of. And that is why there is no Greek nor Yahudi. We're one. There is no male nor female. There is no free nor bond, etc., etc. We are all one. Yahushua is a Yahudi. So when we are one with him, we become Yahudim. And therefore, the last genetically will be a descendant of Joseph. But spiritually, by accepting Yahushua as the Messiah, he becomes a Yahudi. And that is why he becomes the branch of David, even though genetically he is a branch of Joseph, as we see in Genesis 49. So genetically he comes from Joseph, but spiritually through Yahushua he is a branch of David. And another thing about that is that in Judaism, which believes in reincarnation, because it is found in the scriptures. It was Catholicism that took it out, and then Christianity continued with the idea that it is satanic or made up. However, it is found in the scriptures. For instance, John the Baptist was the reincarnation of Eliyahu. Yahushua himself said it. Um, it is believed in Judaism that the last, the second manifestation would be David reincarnated. So if it is David reincarnated, then therefore he is a branch of David spiritually, while genetically of Joseph. So, and a rod shall come forth from the stump of Yishai, and a sprout from his roots shall be fruitful. Verse 2. The spirit of Yahweh shall rest upon him. Yahushua came and he was immersed in the water in the Yarden by John the Baptist, and then when he came out, the Ruach HaKodesh, the spirit of Yahweh, came down on him like a dove, right? So this happened with Yahushua for sure, right? The first and the last are like the dove and the turtle dove that are mentioned throughout scriptures over and over again, first and last. So the spirit would manifest in a body, a person, twice. Once as the spirit of truth and then as the spirit of prophecy. Two different parts of the same spirit. In this case, it is referring to the branch, as we are seeing, the sprout, the rod. So it is referring to the last. With Yahushua, it was clear that he had the Spirit, and through him, the Spirit became available for all those who believe in Mashiach and confess his name, as we see in John 14:26. So it is referring to the one who would come at the end, and Yahweh would give him of his Spirit. There is something interesting that we see here, and it is that, as you know, the menorah, which is the symbol of Israel, also the symbol of this congregation, a menorah with 7 lights, lampstand. The lampstand with 7 lights represents the congregation, just like it has 7 lights, just like there are 7 congregations in Revelation 2 and 3, right? So the 7 lights also connect with the 7 millenniums of human history, the 7 um, days of the week, etc., etc. So everything that has to do with 7. Um, and in this case, we see how Yahweh reveals the Ruach HaKodesh as a menorah, because the menorah, or the lampstand, we use the middle candle or the middle light to light the rest of the lights, right? And therefore, Yahushua is represented by that middle light that lights the rest. Like when Moshe as well, and therefore the witness like Moshe, called the 70 elders, and Yahweh took from the spirit of Moshe to give to the 70 elders, and they all received the spirit, part of the spirit, not the spirit that the apostle received later on. I want to make that clear, but the spirit that was within Moshe at the time. And still, Moshe didn't lose any spirit. So just like when you used a flame to light 7 flames or 6 flames in this case, the original flame remains the same. It doesn't change. It doesn't diminish or anything. So that is how the spirit works. And we see it here as it says, the spirit of Yahweh shall rest upon him. So this represents the middle light of the menorah, normally called Shemesh, which would mean sun, because the 7 lights connect with the 7 planets. The sun in Hebrew culture is seen as a planet, because planet, well, that would be in Greek culture, in fact, because planet is a Greek word, and it refers to a wandering star. Planet means wandering, so it refers to type of luminaries in the firmament that have a different movement than the rest of the stars. So that's why they are wandering. And in this case, the sun is one of those. It wanders in the same way as the other so-called, well, they are planets. The Earth is not a planet, so that's why I was about to say so-called. So the planets, Saturn, Jupiter, they are planets. They are wandering stars. but the earth is not a planet. The scriptures never calls the earth a planet. I want to make that clear. So, um, the sun, from the 7 planets that can be seen with the naked eye, the sun is the one that has the cycle of 355 days, 0.24, and therefore it resides in the middle of the rest of the planets according to their cycles. The moon is the one with the smaller or shorter uh, circuit or cycle. Then comes Mercury, etc. So then Venus, then the Sun, then Mars, then Jupiter, and then Saturn. So that is the order of their cycles, and therefore the Sun is in the middle. And the Sun, that's why the light in the middle is called Shemesh, or sometimes Shamash, which means servant, or at least that's how they interpret it, and is used as a servant to light the rest. That's why Yahushua, who is the king, the high priest, came down to be a servant, right? In order to give us the spirit. So the light in the middle of the menorah connects with the sun, and that is why also connects with Mashiach, because Mashiach came on the 4th day of the fourth millennium, like in the 4th day of the creation, the light of the world was made. So Yahushua came on the 4th day, just like the light in the middle is the 4th, and is used to light the rest. So the spirit of Yahweh shall rest upon him, like the light in the middle. And then with that, we start lighting the other lights, which are branches from this same spirit. And that is why also it's interesting how the menorah normally, most, I guess, menorahs that you will see, or menorot in this case, the first light is connected to the last, the second to the one before last, and the third is connected to the fifth, right? Because in the middle there's the fourth. So we also see that in this verse, because it says the spirit of Yahweh shall rest upon him. That is in the singular, that is one in the middle. Then it says the spirit of wisdom and understanding, like the one at the beginning and at the end. Wisdom and understanding, that is huge. Like the 2 pillars, the beginning of the 2 pillars of the temple, like in the 2 pillars of the tree of life used normally in Kabbalah, right? Wisdom, which is Chokmah, and understanding, which is Binah. Wisdom and understanding. Yahushua came to bring wisdom. That's why he spoke in parables. The last comes to bring understanding, and that's why Yahushua said that in the second manifestation he would speak clearly. So we see 2 that are connected, the spirit of wisdom and understanding. Then another 2, the spirit of counsel and might. And then the other 2, the spirit of knowledge and the fear of Yahweh. Right? The spirit of knowledge and of the fear of Yahweh. So those are the 7 spirits, like in a menorah. I repeat, being the one in the middle, the Shemesh, the Ruach HaKodesh, from which we get wisdom, understanding, counsel, might, knowledge, and fear of Yahweh. In this case, the last receives the spirit to do to complete his ministry. And shall make him breathe in the fear of Yahweh. And he shall not judge by sight of his eyes, nor decide by the hearing of his ears. This is important because, as we will see eventually in Isaiah, in this book, since we will read it eventually, I'm not going to go right now, but Yahweh reveals the coming of the last as a blind and deaf person. Now, not in the physical sense, obviously. Well, not necessarily, obviously, but not in the physical sense. So physically, he will be able to see and hear. But remember that when Yahushua came, those who rejected him were blind spiritually. And in the end times, we are in spiritual darkness. The world is in spiritual darkness. A light has shown for us, thankfully, that is Yahushua, but the world is in spiritual darkness, and that's why the last comes as a thief in the night. And since the last comes as the prodigal son and would be born like all of us in the apostasy, then um, being born in the apostasy is kind of like being blinded by the enemy or by religion. And besides that, to avoid certain arguments during Judgment Day, like people who may say that it was easy for Yahushua to do what he did because he was Yahweh himself and because he could know everything and he saw everything and he heard everything, spirits, demons, angels, etc. Um, then the last, Yahweh manifests as the last as a regular person to uh, give testimony against those who will claim that, because by coming, as it says in Isaiah, um, as a deaf person as and blind, there will be nobody who will be able to claim anything against uh, the way Yahweh did things, in the sense that if the last is able to fulfill what Yahweh uh, revealed that he will fulfill, then anybody in the world could have fulfilled it as well, because most, if not all, depending on how Yahweh will do it, would have more abilities, more um, capacity according to their talents and gifts, spiritual gifts, like being able, like some are able to hear spirits, others are able to see spirits, um, things which the last would not have. Because also, that prophecy that I am mentioning, which I think I'm going to have to go see, um, in that prophecy, Yahweh reveals that his servant would come blind and deaf. And the connection is with the fact that Israel itself acted blind and deaf when it comes to the truth of Yahweh and the doctrine. So since Israel acted that way, the last, who is Israel as a person, and that is why he was represented by Jacob, who became Israel, he would be blind and deaf as the manifestation of that uh, prophecy. So it says here, Isaiah 42:19, who is blind but my servant, or deaf as my messenger whom I sent? Right? So Yahweh is sending his messenger, Mikael, the Malach, as the last. But as he comes in the flesh as prodigal son and in the apostasy, he comes blind and deaf. Who is blind as he who is perfect? Who is blind as he who is perfect, and blind as Yahweh's servant? Right? So the last comes blind and deaf, spiritually speaking, but he will receive discernment, which is connected to the nose. That's why he will know. He knows, right? And that's why the word is connected in English with knowing, the nose, because it is connected with discernment. You smell the air, which represents the spirit. And therefore, to be able to smell if something is good or bad in the physical represents discernment in the spiritual, to be able to discern spirits. So that's why here in Isaiah it says, and shall make him breathe in the fear of Yahweh. And he shall not judge by the sight of his eyes, nor decide by the hearing of his ears. So he won't judge by appearances, which is how this world judges. He won't judge by appearances, nor decide by what people may say, but what Yahweh or the Spirit says. But with righteousness he shall judge the poor, and shall decide with straightness for the meek ones of the earth, and shall strike the earth with the rod of his mouth. This is important because the first came to bring mercy, the last comes to bring justice, vengeance. And he will do it with his preaching, the rod of his mouth. So, but with righteousness he shall judge the poor, and shall decide with straightness for the meek ones of the earth, and shall strike the earth with the rod of his mouth, and slay the wrong with the breath of his lips. Because remember what it says in Revelation 11, that fire will come out of the mouths of the two witnesses. So remember that Eliyahu is the prophet of the witness like Moshe. So the same spirit that is within the witness like Moshe will be passed on to Eliyahu. So they will both spit fire. So just like we read here, instead of using fire, it mentions the rod of his mouth. Like in Revelation, it mentions the sword, the sword that comes out of his mouth. And then he says, with the breath of his lips, like the fire that comes out, according to Revelation 11. But it is important to understand that he comes to fight spiritually. He comes to speak to the whole world regarding the wrong beliefs when it comes to the Creator. So Yahushua came to forgive and to lead to Yahweh by becoming the way of Yahweh. And he was only in Israel. So I say all of that to understand that this is referring to a second manifestation, a different one. But with righteousness he shall judge the poor. Yahushua said, I do not judge anybody. You already have somebody to judge you. So Yahushua came as the lawyer, right? When the last comes as the witness, is the witness who says it is his fault or his fault. He is innocent. He didn't do anything. I saw him do it, right? It is the witness. And therefore, through the testimony of the witness, then judgment is clear. So once the lawyer, the first, Yahushua, and the witness, the last, and the witness, Eliyahu, both have testified, then the lawyer and the witness, like Moshe, become one, and that is the judge, and therefore judgment. And shall decide with straightness for the meek ones of the earth, and shall strike the earth with the rod of his mouth, and slay the wrong with the breath of his lips. Slay the wrong. And righteousness shall be the girdle of his loins, and trustworthiness the girdle of his waist, which is connected to Ephesians chapter 6, which obviously is in the new covenant, which came after Yahushua manifested. And my point with that is that Ephesians 6 tells us about the fight, the spiritual battle or war in which we are, right? Against principalities, authorities, and all of that it says in Ephesians 6, 11, and 12. So we are in a spiritual war, and we need to protect ourselves. In Ephesians chapter 6, it says, put on the complete armor of Elohim, for you to have power to stand against the schemes of the devil. Because we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against authorities, against the world rulers of the darkness of this age, against spiritual matters of wickedness in the heavenlies, right? Because of this, take up the complete armor of Elohim, so that you have power to withstand in the wicked day, and having done all, to stand. Stand then, having girded your waist with truth. Girded your waist with truth. And here we see that it says, and trustworthiness, the girdle of his waist. Right? And we go to the 5th verse, when it says trustworthiness, it says, ha'emunah, that is the faith. Emunah, the faith. So the last girds his waist with his faith in Mashiach, obviously in Yahweh through Mashiach. And just in case, because we read here truth, it is possible that in the original version of Ephesians, which is in Hebrew, that the original has the same here, emunah. It is possible. Why? Because emet is truth, and emet is the root of emunah. Emunah is to believe in the truth. That is the true faith. So it is possible that it said emunah and they wrote emet because of the connection. It is also possible that it wrote that um, it was written emet, which is truth, right? Which would be a bit different, but connected through the root, which is truth, the root of emunah, right? So, or aman, which is faithful. Either way, obviously it is connected, even if it's one emunah and the other one emet, they are connected. But also that difference would be if there is a difference in the original version of Ephesians. It would be because this is referring to the coming of the last. Isaiah 11 is referring to the coming of the last, while Ephesians is referring to the 144,000 and how they are soldiers that need to get their armor. But you know how the leader normally has a bit of a different armor than the rest. So it will be possible that that is the reason why there is a difference between Isaiah 11 that it says that he will gird his waist with emunah, and this one emet, because then it says, and having put on the breastplate of righteousness, and having fitted your feet with the preparation of the good news of peace, above all, having taken up the shield of belief, which would be emunah here, with you shall have power to quench all the burning arrows of the wicked one. Take also the helmet of deliverance and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of Elohim, praying at all times. So it says the breastplate of righteousness. And Isaiah 11 first said, and righteousness shall be the girdle of his loins. Right? So we see that it is referring to someone who would come after Yahushua, because it was Yahushua who came to give us the sword. He is the sword, the word of Yahweh. That's why he said, I did not come to bring peace, I came to bring a sword. So Yahushua came to give us the sword in order for us to be able to fight the battle. He gave us the sword, he gave us the shield, which is the faith. He gave us the truth, which is to gird our waist, etc. The righteousness, the breastplate. So the last comes and believes in Yahushua and therefore puts on the armor of Yahweh mentioned in Isaiah 11 as mentioned in Ephesians. So, and righteousness shall be the girdle of his loins, and trustworthiness or emunah the girdle of his waist. And a wolf shall dwell with the lamb. And a wolf shall dwell with the lamb, and a leopard lie down with the young goat, and the calf and the young lion and the fatling together, and a little child leads them. This is a verse that some people claim Mandela effect happened on it. I do believe that it was just, in this case, I do believe there's something going on with the Mandela effect. But when it comes to this supposed Mandela effect, I do believe that it was just a mistake on some people who mixed up a couple verses. Um, But some, like, there's some people who believe that it used to say the lion shall dwell with the lamb. So now it says the wolf, and they say that is a wrong uh, way to read it, or the Mandela effect. However, wolf makes more sense in the verse, because the wolf is the one who eats the lamb or the sheep, right? Obviously, a lion also eats lamb if they get it, but the most common enemy is the wolf. That's why wolf in sheep clothing, right? Not lion in sheep clothing. So, and a wolf shall dwell with the lamb. Also, there is a great amount of Jewish people who do not believe that Yahushua is the Messiah. And they put this verse as the reason why they don't believe it, because they say that the wolf is not dwelling with the lamb, and therefore this hasn't manifested. Yet they don't understand that this is referring to what will happen after the coming of the last. Yet Yahushua is the first. So since they were expecting everything to happen in the same time, since they didn't see this happen, they don't believe in Yahushua, even though he is the Messiah. And this wasn't supposed to happen right away after Mashiach came. This is supposed to happen right away after the last comes, dies, and resurrects. And even then, 3.5 years later, not even exactly after 3.5 years later, then this will happen also. So obviously, the literal here is clear, right? The wolf, which used to eat the lamb, will now be a friend of the lamb because they won't eat each. Well, the wolf won't eat lamb. The wolf will eat the same as the lamb, the grass of the field, stuff like that, herbs, like it was in the beginning of time. So Yahweh will bring everything back to its original um, purpose and everything, perfection, goodness, and therefore the wolf shall dwell with the lamb, the leopard lie down with the young goat, the calf and the young lion, right? So all the animals that were prey will be now together without any issues with those who used to eat them. Um, so the spiritual interpretation of this verse, remember that the scripture refers to the the nations as animals for several reasons. Many reasons. One of them, each nation was given to an angel, and the angels were made in the image of animals. That's why those nations started worshiping those angels and then started worshiping animals, because those angels had the shape of those animals, the original shape. Um, on the other hand, Israel is seen as the human because Israel was given the Torah, which is the law that we need to fulfill, the way we need to act in order to actually be human beings, right? Because people can look like a human being but act like a an animal. So when a person receives the Torah and fulfills the commandments, then that person is actually being a human. So that is why culture actually comes from called Torah. That's why in Spanish, cultura, in English, culture, is from called Torah, which means voice of instruction, the voice of the Torah. That is true culture, comes from what the Torah tells us to do. So here is referring to how all the nations now shall dwell together without fighting. There will be no war ever again. That referring to the millennium. Then Gog and Magog will happen. There will be a war, yeah. Well, that won't be really a war because Yahweh will destroy them without us having to fight at the end of the millennium. And then eternity, in which for sure there will be no war ever again, and there will be nations. So it is referring to how all nations who used to fight each other will now be friends. And a wolf shall dwell with the lamb, and a leopard lie down with the young goat, and the calf and the young lion and the fatling together, and a little child leads them. That would be Israel leading all the nations. Also, obviously, the Messiah leading Israel and the nations. Where it says a little child, obviously, in the literal, is like saying that even a little child won't be in danger being around all of those animals, a lion, a leopard, a wolf. But also, let me see the word that he uses in Hebrew in verse 6 at the end. It says, Katon, a little one. Naar Katon, a little youth, youngster. Remember that Naar, it is a term normally used to refer to Mikael, the Malach of Yahweh, as the young Yahweh, both in the scriptures and also in Jewish literature. And Katan, which is small, in this case, Katon, remember that the last comes as Paul, and Paul means small, little one, like Mordechai as well. They give that translation to it, although it is connected to other things. Um, and he will be seen as little, as small in importance. So this refers to the last, the Naar Katon, the little child. So continuing. And cow and bear shall feed their young ones lie down together, and a lion eat straw like an ox. Right? So they will both eat straw, the lion just like the ox. So when the last comes, which is what this chapter is prophesying, then this will happen, world peace. That's why Jeremiah is told to reveal that when the prophet manifests who reveals peace, and that peace does happen, then that's the prophet that he sent. And he says it in a couple ways. One, because in human history, there has been no prophet who prophesied peace. Only those false prophets of the world. They obviously always prophesy peace. But then at the end, Yahweh would send one prophet who will bring the peace to the world. But at the very end of history, after all the war that will happen during the second seal and the fifth and sixth trumpet, even Armageddon, right at the very end of it, Armageddon. So the last will come, will prophesy and reveal what is to happen, and then he will be killed, resurrected. The last plagues will happen on earth, Armageddon, and then world peace for 1,000 years. So it says, and the nursing child shall play by the cobra's hole, and the weaned child shall put his hand in the adder's den. Right? So now there will be no creature who will be a danger to us or our children in the literal sense, because everything will be friendly, everything will be good. There will be no danger at all in any way. Just like there will be no inclination to evil in our bodies, in our hearts, there will be no killing each other either within the animal kingdom. So also that reveals that the enemy, Satan, the cobra, the adder, right? Samael, Halel, Azazel, they will have no power at all to hurt us. So it says, they do no evil nor destroy in all my set apart mountain, which represents the kingdom, the heavenly kingdom coming to this earth. They do no evil nor destroy in all my set apart mountain. For the earth shall be filled. I love this verse so much. For the earth shall be filled with the knowledge of Yahweh as the waters cover the sea. That is huge for so many reasons, and it will be amazing to live in that time. And only through Yahushua will be able to live in that time and thank him. So I repeat, for the earth shall be filled with the knowledge of Yahweh as the waters covered the sea. So imagine the sea hasn't been completely um um forgot the word. Yeah, explored. Yeah, hasn't been explored completely. Only a part of it. And imagine all that there is in it that we don't know yet, how big it is that we haven't been able to explore the whole thing, how deep it gets, all of that. That's how deep we will know Yahweh. How well, it's just to think about it, to me, I mean, is huge to have that knowledge of Yahweh. For Yahweh hid himself from this reality, meaning he didn't fill the world with his knowledge, so that people would have free will to get to know life themselves in their own way with their own decisions. But when the knowledge of Yahweh fills the earth, then we will know everything about everything, mainly about him who is everything. So that means everybody will act the in the perfect way all the time. Everybody will do the best every time. And remember that knowledge also is the word used for intimacy, right? When Adam knew Eve, that meant they made love, and then came Seth. So the knowledge of Yahweh will cover the earth because he will be one with us. We will get to know him in every sense. So, remember that when Yahweh made the earth, in the beginning, Elohim created the heavens and the earth, and the let me go and read it. Remember how I said that Yahweh is bringing everything back, so animals won't hurt each other or men. And now it says that knowledge will cover the earth like water covers the sea. In the beginning, it says, and the earth came to be formless and empty, and darkness was on the face of the deep, and the spirit of Elohim was moving on the face of the waters. So water covered all the earth in the beginning. But now, instead of water, the knowledge of Yahweh will cover all the earth at the beginning of the new creation. And remember that Yahushua is the water of life. So we will be filled with the spirit of Yahushua, the water of life, which is the knowledge of Yahweh. That's why Yahushua said, if you have seen me, you have seen the Father. For I and the Father are one. So it will be filled with water, but now spiritual water. For the earth shall be filled with the knowledge. Now, knowledge also is da'at in Hebrew. Let me see if it appears that way here. 9. Kimala, because he will fill haaretz, the earth, deya, et Yahweh, of the knowledge of Yahweh. Kamaim layam, like the waters of the sea. Mekasim. But here, well, deya, knowledge. Normally, da'at, but as you can see, is the same. Dalet, ayin, and then hey, deya, knowledge. Et Yahweh. So you see how this word, which has no translation to English nor any other language other than Hebrew, et, aleph tav, the first and last letter of the alphabet. Every time it appears in the scriptures, it refers to something that the writer, or in this case Yahweh, is not telling us directly, but is hidden. Remember that it mainly refers to the first and the last manifestation of Yahweh on this earth. So the knowledge of Yahweh comes through the first and the last. So because it will be filled, the earth, with the knowledge of the first and the last of Yahweh, the first and the last, which is Yahweh. Also, obviously, Et can be seen as the first who was crucified, because the Tav is a cross. Also, remember that in the beginning, we ate of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. But now Yahweh will fill the earth with the knowledge of Yahweh, and Yahweh is good. It's written. So he will fill the world with the knowledge of that which is good, and that which is evil will disappear. Because that was the idea of this human history, for us to know evil and then choose good. And when we choose good, then he will fill it, the whole earth, with good. There is good in the earth, but it's very little, few drops. And even though it may be a few drops of goodness from Yahweh on this earth, there is more good than bad. Even though we are focused more on the bad, and the news focus more on the bad, and everything focuses more on the bad, there is more good than bad. And we can attest to that in our own lives. We tend to because of trauma and other things, remember mostly the negative. But when we really think about it, there are more good days than bad days in general. we are more well, and obviously there are exceptions to the rule, and there are reasons why. May Yahweh have mercy on anybody who may have more bad days than good days in their whole life, which I find difficult to be the case. But there has to be a reason if that is the case. But normally we're more healthy than sick. Even if you get sick every year, uh, you have more days to with health. But normally you don't think about that when you're healthy. You think about those days when you're sick, right? You're sick and you're like, oh, why didn't I appreciate more when I was not sick, right? So that's the sad thing about the flesh. But Yahweh is good, and any single every single thing that we receive that is good, even when we are sick and we have some type of relief, uh, all of that comes from Yahweh. For Yahweh is good, and everything that is good in this reality comes from Him, because this reality, as it is bad. So eventually, all reality will be good completely. Now, as I was saying, Da'at, here it says they are, but Da'at, the root of knowledge, remember that comes after you get wisdom and understanding. And the mix of wisdom and understanding gives you true knowledge. Knowledge is not like Hebrew knowledge, is not like the knowledge that most people think of when they hear the word knowledge, because most people think of knowledge as information. And although that is part of it, it's not. Information is like, well, I always use this example or analogy when it comes to understanding. But like I said, after you get wisdom, then you get understanding. And after you unite both, because understanding came after, then after you got understanding, you already had wisdom, and therefore you're able to mix them and get knowledge. So it is like when your parent tells you, when you're a child, do not touch fire. You're receiving wisdom about fire. But when you touch it because you didn't listen, then you get burned. Now you understand what they were talking about and why they were telling you that. And therefore, now you know how it feels to get burned. So it is deep knowledge, not just information, which in this case was wisdom, right? Don't touch because you get burned. But once you get burned, now you know. And there's nothing like knowing, even if it hurts, because he helps you to keep, well, to listen next time sometimes. So, that is the mix of wisdom and understanding. So first and last, like the aleph and the tav right here. So once the aleph and the tav become one, wisdom and knowledge, we receive wisdom and understanding. Then we receive the knowledge of Yahweh. For the earth shall be filled with the knowledge of Yahweh as the waters covered the sea. I repeat, is an amazing verse, and we could, I'm sure, do a whole study just with this verse. As the waters cover the sea. And in that day there shall be a root of Yishai. Okay, so understand this. Every time that scripture says in that day, it refers to the end of times. Obviously, in the context, it will refer to what he just said. And what he just said is referring to the end of times, when the last comes and then the millennium. So this is referring to the millennium, everything that he had just said regarding the animals and all of that. So when the millennium is going to start, in that day, there shall be, and remember that the millennium is a day because a day is like 1,000 years. So, and in that day, there shall be a root of Yishai. So this is something that Jewish people, I guess, didn't see. It says there shall be. So by the time that this is going to happen, our time, there would be already a root planted. And Yahushua revealed to the Pharisees that he is that root, the root of David. So, and in that day, when the millennium comes, there shall be a root of Yishai standing as a banner to the people. A banner is placed as high as possible, right? For everybody to see, no matter how far they are. Well, the higher it is, the farther you can see it, of course, right? So the banner to the people, that is like the flag of a country. That's why we are one in Yahushua. There is no Greek nor Yahudi. We are one in Him. He is the one who makes us a people, a nation. So He is our flag, our banner. And that's why Yahweh took Him up to the heavens and put Him on the right side of His throne, like a flag is raised to the heavens, and the wind, like the ruach, will make it move right to one side, wherever the wind is going, of course, in this case. But Yahushua is at the right side in the heavens, like our banner, and He's standing there right now when all of this will happen, which is what we also see in Revelation 6, which sadly is not understood in Christianity because they do not understand the first and the last. They only think of one, the first, as being also the last, and do not understand the coming of the last. Like I always say, 2,000 years ago, the Jewish people were expecting a lion, but they received a lamb. So they sacrificed them on Pesach. Now, Christianity is expecting a lamb, but Yahweh will manifest as a lion. So they will think He is Satan, who is roaring, looking for whom He may devour, because He comes as a thief in the night. So in in the book of Revelation, we read that Yahushua HaMashiach is the one opening the seven seals of the book of life, the scroll that has the names of those who will enter life. So when Yahushua the Lamb opens the first seal, the lion speaks out to John to go and see, and he sees how the last is manifesting on earth, represented by a rider on a white horse using a bow with a crown. So, and in that day there shall be a root of Yishai. So when the last manifests, there is a root in heaven. So that is also important or interesting when we think about it, that heaven is the beginning of everything. And Yahushua is the root, and He's in heaven. So in a way, just like a tree grows from the earth and goes up to heaven, originally, the true tree is growing from heaven, going down to earth. And we are the branches, we are the fruit, right? The root is in the heavens. So, standing as a banner to the people, that's why we call on Yahweh in the name of Yahushua, who is at His right hand. Unto Him the nations shall seek, because the nations can become part of the people, part of the kingdom of Yahweh through Yahushua. So accepting the banner, Yahushua, is becoming part of the nation. Unto Him the nation shall seek. Like when a person, like for instance, right now, everything that is happening in the United States with the illegals, that they are taking them out of the United States. Hopefully, it's just that. Now, I have said several times that, I'm sorry about all the Hispanics that are there and illegally and are going through issues because of that. I'm sorry, but it is logical for that to happen. It is logical for a president to take care of the borders and to take care of those who are inside before he takes care of those who are outside, which is something that they have been doing backwards in the United States, helping Ukraine and all that before helping the other people. But that's another story. So, I was thinking, and I think Yahweh put this in my heart because I received the thought and I was giving it thought, and then they said something that I was like, oh, okay, so that's a sign. Um, you know how in the United States they use the pyramid as their symbol, and that's why in Judaism they think of the United States as Egypt. Um, America, they say, is Egypt, the new Egypt. So they use the pyramid, the Eye of Horus as the Eye of Lucifer, and many other things connected to Egypt. And our people have been going for the past, I don't know how many decades, to the United States looking for work, right? And you know how our people, most of us, if not all, are descendants of Israel. We are called Latin or Hispanic or whatever nowadays, but we are Israelites who have been going to a new Egypt for work, which is slavery, like in Egypt. And this time there's a Pharaoh who actually wants to kick every Israelite out, and the Israelites are fighting to stay in. Isn't that crazy? And I saw this woman. She was not Latin or Hispanic. She was actually from the United States, I think. And she was holding like in a protest, trying to stop a truck, which is impossible, right? But she was trying to stop it, and she was like, "Don't kill me!" Like after a little bit, she was like, "Don't kill me! Don't kill me!" And then she started screaming, "Let go of my people! Let my people go! Let my people go!" Like if it was Moshe talking to Pharaoh to let the people go. But in this case, she was referring to the truck who was taking illegals out of the country. And she was saying, let them go out of the truck for them to remain in the States working. So everything is upside down. Those who went looking for slavery want to keep it. They don't want to get out. They get angry if they are kicked out. And Pharaoh wants to kick them out and they just want to stay. So it's kind of weird. And like I said, I wasn't even going to mention it, but then I saw a connection. And like I said, when this girl or woman said, let my people go, I was like, for real? Because by that time, I was already thinking about this whole thing. It is crazy how the new Egypt has a bunch of our people working. Now the new leader wants to take them out of the country because they are illegally working there. And everybody's fighting for them to stay in. And perhaps, like I have said, perhaps that is Yahweh working for them to not be there when everything that will happen will happen. And I'm sure many of our congregation are there and they will be there and Yahweh will take care of them. But if one of them is sent to another country for whatever reason, that also would be because of the perfect will of Yahweh. For all the things are for the good of those who love Yahweh. So I was saying that because I just read here, and in that day there shall be a root of Yishai standing as a banner to the people. Unto him the nation shall seek, and his rest shall be steam. So the nations, oh yeah, what I was going to say is that when a person is in the United States and does everything legally in order to become part of the United States, they have to respect the flag. They have to give honor to the flag, right? Which means to the country. Like they have to say, if I want to be part of this country, then this will be my country, no longer the country I come from. So that is the same case here. Yahushua is our banner. Unto him the nation shall seek. So the nations, the people of the nations, instead of thinking about going to the United States for work and getting money, should be thinking about going to Yahweh and accepting Yahushua as their flag to be one with him. No matter where they are on earth, because we are heaven's ambassadors, right? So unto him the nations shall seek, and his rest shall be steam. Listen to this verse. And it shall be in that day that Yahweh sets his hand again a second time. You see how he even said it twice? Again, a second time. It's like saying the same thing with two different, in two ways. Remember that Yahweh mentions his hand when referring to the Exodus, that he did it with a strong hand. So when he says that he will set his hand again a second time, is referring to the second Exodus through the last, which is the hand of Yahweh, like Michael, the hand in the Exodus. And the finger of that hand was the one that wrote the Ten Commandments. So Michael is the hand, represented also by the hand of Sarah. When Tamar had children, she had twins, and the hand of Sarah came out. Then he went in, and then Peretz came out, and then Sarah came out with the scarlet thread representing the coming of the last, the second one, who first manifested as the hand of Yahweh, Mikael, in the Exodus. When Yahweh revealed to Moshe the name after saying, Eyeh asher eyeh, I will be whom I will be, revealing that there would be two Exodus, Eyeh asher eyeh. So now he's referring to the second Eyeh, the second Exodus, and it shall be in that day that Yahweh sets his hand again, a second time, the second manifestation. Now as the prophet like Moshe, being Mikael in the flesh. A second time to recover the remnant, meaning to gather the chosen few. To recover the remnant of his people, the chosen few, 144,000, Revelation 7, Revelation 14, the second Exodus. And it shall be in that day that Yahweh sets his hand again a second time to recover the remnant of his people who are left from Ashur and from Mizraim, from Patros and from Cush, from Elam and from Shinar, from Hamat and from the islands of the sea. Meaning the second Exodus now will be from the four corners of the earth. Not just one country like Egypt in that time. This time it will be from the four corners of the earth where we were dispersed. To recover the remnant of his people who are left. Now, from Ashur, which represents the world government, the New World Order, and from Mizraim, which represents the world religion. From Patros, from Cush, from Elam, and from Shinar, from Hamat, that's seven, representing the seven continents, representing completeness, like the whole earth, and then adds the islands of the sea as the eighth, a new beginning, like saying, even every corner, whatever you may be, Yahweh will get you. And he shall raise a banner for the nations. That is Yahushua. And he shall raise a banner for the nations. In this case, it is Yahweh coming as the last, as the hen, as the witness like Moshe for this second Exodus. And he, as the last, shall raise a banner, which is the first, for the nations. So the last will preach to the nations that Yahushua is our Savior and the one who makes us one people. So Yahweh will raise a banner. Now, this is amazing now that I see it, because banner in Hebrew is nes, verse 12. Venasa nes lagoim, right? And he will lift up a banner, a flag, a miracle even for the nations. And he will add ve'asaf, or he will unite or gather, ve'asaf. But this is the root of Yosef. So this refers to the coming of the last descendant from Joseph. And this is Yahushua, who was born and killed and resurrected on the month of Nisan, which Nes is the root of that name of the month. Now, why is this important? Because what did Moshe do in the desert? He lifted up a banner with a serpent. And I say banner so that you guys understand, because it uses in Hebrew the same word, nes. So he lifted up a nes. Who did it? Moshe. And now he's saying that the last, who happens to be the witness like Moshe, will lift up a nes, a banner, because he will give honor to Yahushua. As we read the other time when Yahushua was speaking to Nicodemus. Sadly, this will be in Greek, but so Nakdimon. So Yahushua tells Nicodemus, or Nakdimon, it says, 14, and as Moshe lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, even so the Son of Man, the son of Adam, has to be lifted up. right? So as Moshe lifted up the serpent, where was the serpent? On a banner, on a nest. It was raised up or lifted up as a banner, the serpent, for them to see and believe and be healed, which represented that Yahushua would be sacrificed, seen as a serpent, but whoever believed in him as the Messiah would be healed of the poison of sin. Because Yahushua was actually killing the serpent by being killed himself. Because remember that Mashiach has the same numerical value as Nahash, which is serpent. So by killing Mashiach, they were killing the serpent. 358 minus 358, 0 power for the serpent. So, and as Moshe lifted up, we could say here, the banner, the nace. We are reading here, and he will lift up a banner for the nations. So the last comes and lifts up Yahushua as the banner for everybody to see him and believe in him, like Moshe did in the desert. However, since Yahushua is different than the world, the one the world loves and preaches, which is Jesus, they will see Yahushua as a serpent or as a doctrine of serpent. Let me see something else. Yeah, brother Pablos is saying how this verse 12 connects with Proverbs 34, chapter 30, verse 4. In a way, like it says that Yahweh gathers the waters, and here it says that gather the outcasts of Israel who are within the nations, which are seen as the sea. So it's similar. And assemble the dispersed of Yahudah from the four corners of the earth. And as we know, then he mentions what is his name and the name of his son, if you know it. And the name of his son will be that banner, Yahushua. Now, what I was talking about here in Numbers 21. So Yahweh said to Moshe, make a fiery serpent and set it on a pole. That pole is a nest. Verse 8. You see, Vayomer Yahweh el Moshe, Asei, Lecha, Saraf, Vesim, Oto al Nes, and put it on a nest. All right. So there you see that it is the same word. So now let me go back to Isaiah. And he shall raise a banner for the nations. That is the last witness, like Moshe raising the names of Yahushua for the nations. And gather, that was Asaph, because he comes as a descendant of Joseph, and because he comes as the gatherer, as the one who will congregate, like Kohelet, like Shlomo. And he comes to harvest, that is to gather the fruit for Yahweh. There is one who sows and one who harvests, like Yahushua said. And he shall raise a banner for the nations and gather the outcasts of Israel and assemble the dispersed of Yahudah from the four corners of the earth. You see how it is talking about the end of times, about the harvest, the second Exodus. And it mentions that Yahudah still is dispersed. And I say that because to most people nowadays, most of Yahudah is in Israel, and only the rest of Israel is outside, which is not true. Everybody is dispersed. And the envy of Ephraim shall turn aside. Ephraim as a people, right? The tribe, but the tribe became so many that Yahweh and the prophets start using the name Ephraim instead of Israel. So when Ephraim appears, it represents the many who will have to go through death. So, and the envy because the many will, or spiritually, they envy the few. The many envy the few. So Yahweh is saying, finally, when they are all resurrected, the many will respect the few. And the envy of Ephraim shall turn aside, and the adversaries of Yahudah be cut off. Like when Yahweh says in Psalm 110 to Yahushua, seated at my right hand until I put your enemies as your footstool. Yahushua is from the tribe of Yahudah. The adversaries of Yahushua are Satan and the third of the angels, so they will be cut off from heaven, as we see in Revelation 12 after the resurrection of the last. And the envy of Ephraim shall turn aside, and the adversaries of Yehudah be cut off. Now, this is interesting as well, because if we think of the adversaries of Yehudah as those who hate Yahushua, they will be cut off. Then the envy of Ephraim would refer to those who envy Ephraim instead, because there are other verses, or even in this one, other translations where we could interpret that Ephraim envied Yehudah. But the way it is being said here can be seen as those who envy Ephraim, just like the brothers would envy Joseph. But then that envy will disappear through the last who comes from Ephraim. They won't envy him at the end, at least after resurrecting. And the envy of Ephraim shall turn aside, and the adversaries of Yehudah be cut off. Ephraim, oh, there you go, this is what I was saying. Ephraim shall not envy Yehudah, and Yehudah not trouble Ephraim, right? Because Yehudah would become an adversary of Ephraim. And Yehudah not trouble Ephraim, because when the first who comes from Yehudah and the last who comes from Ephraim become one, then they will all be one, the whole nation. 14. But they shall fly down upon the shoulder of the Philistines toward the west. Together they plunder the people of the east, their hand stretching forth on Edom and Moab, as in Samael and Halel. Their hand stretching forth on Edom and Moab, and the children of Ammon, which would be Azazel, shall be subject to them. I find very interesting that it mentions Edom, Moab, and Ammon, these three nations, because separately, in different parts of scriptures, we see them how they are connected to Samael, Halel, and Azazel. So they fit perfectly here, as in us getting the authority to destroy the three Satans, Samael, Halel, and Azazel. And I even find funny or interesting that it says, and the children of Ammon, as in those who believe in the false Messiah. Their hand stretching forth on Edom and Moab, and the children of Ammon shall be subject to them. And Yahweh shall put under the ban the tongue of the sea of Mizraim, and he shall wave his hand over the river, right? As when referring once again to the Exodus, now to the second Exodus, and just like we went through the Sea of Reeds, known as the Red Sea, and then through the Yarden, the river, both times the sea and the river separated for us to go through it dry. So now in this case, the water represents death, and the water or death will give space for the chosen few to go from this life to the next without experiencing death. So dry, without getting wet. And Yahweh shall put under the ban the tongue of the sea of Mizraim. The tongue, which is interesting because it would connect also to the things that they say in the false religion, the way they pray, the names they invoke with their tongue. Because remember that in the chosen few, Yahweh says in Revelation 7 and 14 that there is no the seed found in their mouth, in their tongues. In this case, those who are of the doctrine of the world, the apostasy, they are in the religion of Egypt. That's why I mentioned Ashur represents the world government, Egypt represents the world religion. So those who are in the world religion, they are like Mizraim, Egyptians. And therefore, the tongue of the sea of Mizraim, as in what they preach. Put under the ban the tongue of the sea of Mizraim, and he shall wave his hand, meaning the last, and again the Malach, over the river with the might of his spirit, and shall strike it in the seven streams. Once again, the seven, as in striking the seven heads of the beast, the seven horns that are left in the book of Daniel. And shall cause men to tread it in sandals. The sandals, as we saw also in Ephesians, represent the good news of Shalom. So through the good news of Mashiach, it is that the chosen few will be able to pass from this world to the next without experiencing death. Those are the sandals, the good news of the true Messiah, Yahushua. And there shall be a highway, and there shall be a highway for the remnant. Yahushua said, I am the way. And right now he is very high at the right hand of the Father. And there shall be a highway for the remnant, the chosen few of his people, those left from Ashur, as it was for Israel in the day when he came up from the land of Mizraim. So he just said it to make it clear. Just like it happened during the first Exodus, will happen again from all the nations of the world, the four corners. And there shall be a highway for the remnant of his people, those left from Ashur, and as it was for Israel in the day when he came up from the land of Mizraim. And that's how the chapter ends.